Good morning, everyone. I am Arianna Marucci, and I am project manager at ENOL, and I'm part of the coordination team of the GILL project. Today, I'm here with my colleague, Gabriela Quaranta, and with the BiLabs colleagues with whom this this session is co-organized. So today's session is called From Plan to Practice, Communicating and Disseminating Results in the GILL project. So we're going to learn which communication strategies and dissemination strategies work and are effective for projects like GILL, working with gendered and innovation and also living labs. And we will see both more theoretical parts and more strategic and real life examples of these strategies that work in real life. Before we start, just a few housekeeping rules. So please keep in mind that the session is being recorded. So if you don't want to appear in the recording or you don't agree with that, please turn off your camera now. We ask you to please keep your microphone muted when not talking. And so during the session, please write your questions if you have some in the chat. We will have a question and answers moment later by the end of the session. So you will be able to speak and discuss there. But for the remaining part, please write your questions in the chat. And remember that all interventions are equally valid. This is today's agenda. So we're doing a welcome and icebreaker now. Then we will guide you through a short introduction to the GILL project. Then we're going to understand how dissemination and communication work in general terms. And then we're moving on to the more, let's say, more like we're deepening today's session with understanding what inclusive communication is. Then we're going to understand communication in living labs, and then we're going from plan into practice with some insights from communication and dissemination strategies in the GILL projects. And then finally, we're going to go through one of the successful cases of GILL, which is the action-oriented experimentation number 13. And we will explain what action-oriented experimentations are in a few minutes. Finally, we have a question and answer and discussion moment, and then the closing remarks. Before we start, we would like to play a little session on Mentimeter. It's very fast, actually. It will just take a few minutes. So if you want, you can scan this QR code with your phone, or if you prefer to join with your computer, please go to menti.com and use the code 78520936. And in a few seconds that you are all in, I will share the Mentimeter screen so that we can see. It's a simple word cloud just to set the scene for today and see what you expect basically from today. So I will share the Mentimeter screen now. Okay, so the question, I see you're already starting to write, but the question was, in one word, how do you think that communication of results in gender and innovation projects should be? And we see, I see words like inclusive, smart, equal, interactive, accessible, direct. Actually, I'm really happy that the word inclusive at the moment is so big among all the others, because actually that's the word I would have used if I had to think of just one word for that. But of course, all the other words that you're writing are all very important and fundamental when it comes to communication and dissemination of such results, and you will see it very soon in the session. Catchy also, interactive. And probably, I think we all wrote something. I don't know if you can write more than one word. Probably you can, but what we have here is already very, I think it's sufficient to set up the scene for today, because this is all very true. So I would go back to the main presentation and provide you with a little introduction to the GILL project, and then we'll see if this is actually reflected, if these words are actually reflected in the session. Thank you so much for playing this little word cloud with us. So the GILL project stands for Gendered Innovation Living Labs, and at the moment the coordination team of the GILL project is made by Gabriela Quaranta, as I said before, the head of network and GILL coordinator, and me, Ariana Marucci, part of the GILL coordination team. So the objective of the GILL project is that of creating a pan-European living lab and related tools to support what we call gender-responsive smart innovation and entrepreneurship. And this pan-European living lab and these tools and methods aim at making the open innovation ecosystem more inclusive, at aligning the innovation with the actual needs of the society, also with the expectations and values within the different societies, and broadening knowledge and collaboration among the four actors of the so-called quadruple helix, who are citizens, government, industry, and academia. In GILL, there are different objectives, but we focus on four main priorities that you can see here, which are to enable the organizational and cultural changes, to increase the integration of gender diversity, inclusiveness into the different phases of product design, technology, implementation and creation, and innovation, to enhance professional development in different sectors, and to allow gendered educational practices. As I said before, another key part of GILL, being also very much focused on living labs, of course, is that of fostering the dialogue and collaboration and co-creation among the key actors of the so-called quadruple helix, who are being engaged all along the project through different participatory activities and in the action, especially of the action-oriented experimentations, which, as I said before, I will explain in a minute what they are. And as I said before, the four elements that we're taking into account when involving all these actors are the citizens, the industry, the academia, and the government. So really the society as a whole. In GILL, we act across different domains of action, and particularly across a matrix of horizontal spheres of innovation and vertical priorities. The horizontal spheres of innovation are the ones you see on the left side of the screen, and they're involved, if not all, some of them, they're involved in all activities of our project, basically. And we see tools and methods, innovation and products, individual and team and societal processes. And then the other part of the matrix is the vertical priorities, which are health and resilience, green transition, and digital transformation, which are themes that are very important and fundamental for the current European Commission strategy and goals. How do we and why do we perform all of this? Basically, we do this through the pilot living labs that we have in the GILL project that we call action-oriented experimentations, finally. This is what they are. They are partners who operate as pilot living labs, and they assess basically how the innovation, the gendered innovation, is supported and happens in their organization, for example, by analyzing and studying the composition of teams. This leads to the generation of new ideas and to the understanding of the women's scope input into this. Basically, through the action-oriented experimentations, this pilot living lab will develop new approaches, methods towards gendered innovation, will test them, evaluate the changes that they create, and so validate the GILL results, basically. All our results and more actually are available on our online platform, the GILL Hub, which is a pan-European and collaborative hub and community that offers tools, methods, services, and all kinds of materials basically supporting gender-responsive smart innovation and entrepreneurship. This hub is divided into modules, which are grouped into three main categories: the explore, learn, and meet categories. And they all have materials to really support the user's journey towards gendered innovation and entrepreneurship. And I want to just give you a few examples of what you can find in each of the sections. For example, in Explore, you will find everything related to the action-oriented experimentations, to the gender-responsive methods, also the good practices that we have found, and within the project and also on the outside, because this is a platform of platforms. So we really try to retrieve all the relevant materials. Then we have the Learn part, which contains the validated glossary and the training part, where again you will find either both more static materials, so written materials, documents, and interactive courses and videos. And then on the Meet part, which is the most interactive one, you will see some very interesting resources to connect with peers who are, again, starting their journey maybe towards gender inclusiveness in their organization, or are just interested in understanding more. And here we have, for example, the network, where you can find initiatives close to you and in the rest of Europe. We have the mentoring, which allows you to book one-on-one online sessions with expert mentors and receive specific guidance and insights on the topics that we focus on in the GILL projects, both from the gender side and from the entrepreneurship side. So it's really interesting as well. You also have the role models here. So this platform is really complete, and we invite you all to try it, to register and try it. And this is the link to find it. So now, without further ado, I would leave the floor to the next speaker, Vasilis Voulgarakis, I'm so sorry for the pronunciation, who will guide us through understanding dissemination and communication. So what is that? Thank you.
Thank you, Ariana. Good morning, everyone. You almost nailed the pronunciation, so I'm very pleased, very appreciative for this. Would it be possible to share my own screen just for the sake of running the slides?
Yeah, sure. Yes, of course.
Well, I think we're over here, and I will have okay. So now you can see on full screen
Yes.
the proper presentation mode. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vasilis Voulgarakis. I'm a colleague of dear Eri and Kyriaki, and I have been following GILL projects since quite a while now, because I find it very fascinating, very visionary, and I'm happy to be part of today's agenda and give my 2 cents on understanding the dissemination and the communication. Primarily, we will have 2 key sessions for this presentation. On the one part, we will have a look at some fundamental principles and definitions. We will have a quick view on why and how the dissemination and communication are related to the overall impact of a project, and how they are defined officially by the European Commission. We will see the supporting nature of such tasks. We will have the list of what types of dissemination communication activities happen usually on a European project, the progressiveness that they have throughout the project, and why dissemination communication should feel like a shared vision, a common vision among the project partners. And on the other hand, we will have some more practical examples on some elements that are very key when implementing dissemination communication activities. As you can see, the list here becomes more concrete and a little bit more fundamental. such as the branding of the project, the funding acknowledgement that should always be there, the open access principle, the language, the target audiences that we need to have, and finally, a couple of words about the dissemination, about the documentation and the benchmarking. So first things first. When we talk about dissemination communication, we need to frame it properly. We need to put it in the right perspective. Dissemination communication reflects how a project's impact that is written on the section 2 on a proposal is going to be actualized once the proposal gets funded, because impact, as it is defined by the European Union, implies that if you are a beneficiary of granting, you have the contractual obligation to carry out actions that will increase the impact of the project. And specifically in the Article 17 of the Annotated Grant Agreement, you will find both the definitions of the definitions both of dissemination and communication. So dissemination and communication are rooted to a bigger part of the project, and this is something that we need to bear in mind. Please keep that in mind, because I will refer to this a couple of times more. To define dissemination and communication based on what the European Union says, we can have these two notions. Dissemination, on the one hand, is sharing research results with people who can best make use of them. So it is more oriented towards the scientific community, industry, any commercial players, civil society, or policy makers that are very relevant to what the project is working on. On the other side, the communication is defined a little bit in a more general way, that is to take strategic and target measures to promote the action as a whole, overall. And its results to a multitude of audiences, including not only scientific and technical audiences like the dissemination, but also media, public, and eventually, ideally, engage with such general audiences in a two-way exchange. So, by definition, dissemination communication efforts serve as auxiliary components to the whole project's implementation. Our nature is supporting. We are not the protagonist. And here I have a funny reference to a very popular TV show of some decades ago. Some of you might have seen this, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It looks silly. It looks something that is not so important, but it was one of the best TV series of the previous decades with a huge fandom. And there we had a glue guy, a glue person, who believed in all of the rest of the protagonists and the main heroes. And this is how dissemination communication should act in a project. To be the one who believes and always lifts the rest of the consortium, the one who's always present, willing to help, and be supportive. All right, so think of yourselves as not the protagonist, but the one that can be the best supporting role, you know. And now let's be a little bit more specific and see what kind of outputs could be listed in the dissemination and communication. From the one side, dissemination should and has to include scientific publications, contributions to conferences, workshops, roundtables, sessions that have specific expertise relevant to the project, demonstrations of project tools, solutions, or in the GILL's case, the GILL Hub, for example, policy briefs, or it can also be called policy recommendations towards the European Union and local decision-making stakeholders, recommendations that stem out of the project's best practices, white papers or any sort of briefs, technical ones, socioeconomic ones, again, points that are raised thanks to the project's work and are delivered by the means of a white paper or a brief. And last but not least, synergies and clustering efforts with other EU-funded activities or international ones. And of course, this includes other sister projects, sister EU projects. Then we have the communication outputs that can include posters, brochures, flyers, both digital ones and print ones. Open days and exhibitions, events that are a little bit more relaxed and are focused more on showcasing the project in general public. Of course, in that kind of sessions and that kind of events, technical stakeholders like academians or policymakers or civil society can be present. Then we have newsletters and press releases, the way that we publish media items to the general public. Blog items and news items, especially blogs, seem to be something that is again catching up and is being very, very useful for the projects to communicate in plain language what are the progresses, what are their goals, and what they are actually achieving. And speaking of things that are catching up and getting more and more attention, of course, videos and even podcasts could be communication efforts that can happen for a project. All of them, of course, have a strong online presence. So online channels for the project, such as a website and social media accounts, are very, very useful for the communication of the project and its visibility. Having listed all of these activities, we should bear in mind that they are progressive throughout the project's lifespan. They support the rest of the activities happening on the project, while they are also drawing input from that kind of activities so that we can have our own content and context. At the start of a project, at the beginning of a project, we tend to be more communication heavy because communication is all about promoting the overall concept, the scope, and to raise awareness for the project as a whole and for its team, for what kind of work is going to be implemented on the future stages, etc. And as we proceed and there is significant, there is substantial progress on the project implementation, we tend to be more dissemination oriented because results are becoming available. And this is when we put more emphasis on efforts like scientific publications, participations in third-party conferences, synergies with other projects so that we can demonstrate together some of our results. Having said that, progressiveness throughout the project doesn't necessarily need to be entirely linear. That doesn't mean that communicating the project fades away while we are going towards the final stages of the project. Communicating the project is also very, very important at these final stages, at the mature stages, because this is where you can showcase to general audiences what was the project was about and be very, very meaningful on the information that you share. So please bear in mind that even though we have progressiveness, this doesn't need to be entirely and strictly linear. And one more thing about progressiveness and all these things about not being entirely linear is that multiple dissemination communication activities may stem from a project's result. And we can take, for example, a completion of a task within a work package of a project, which was very fundamental, very core about the project's progress, and now the work has been successfully done. And we have this task completed. This thing that happened elsewhere in the project could be very beneficial for the tasks on the dissemination of the communication. We can work with partners and help them to create a scientific paper, which can be presented in third-party events. Then again, we can work with them and create blog posts out of it so that we can convey this information in a simpler manner. Given that we are able to do so, we can create infographics, which are also more leaning towards the communication side and the creative aspect of the communication. Having made infographics can help us set up a quick social media campaign and bring further visibility to what the task was about and what were the results, but in a way that is simplified and more user-friendly oriented. Then again, we can go one step further and discuss with the relevant partners if we can create some demonstrations in a way of demo videos that we can upload to the YouTube channel of the project. If such a possibility is available, we can collaborate with a partner so that we can have these demo videos, and then we can create a newsletter out of it, which is entirely a communication effort. But all of these small pieces are interlinked to a single project result or a project or an outcome as a whole that happened thanks to the task's completion. So you see, we have multiple aspects stemming out of a single thing. And this is why it is essential to have all of our partners tagged along with us in this. It is very, very important to have a consensus among the project members that dissemination communication is a team effort. It is something that, yes, of course, there is a leader and a coordinator of the dissemination communication activities, but we share this responsibility with everyone. And I hate to say that it is a contractual obligation of each beneficiary, as it was stated at the beginning of this presentation, because even though it stands completely true, it's not so nice for the team spirit. You know, it is better to build a consensus. It is better to have the projects early on the project, the partners, early on the project, to feel like they are engaged and they share the dissemination, the communication responsibilities, because they have contribute to this. And to do so, a very nice example could be the product box exercise. It is something that we have taken out of the agile software development, which was also taken from another thing by the agile software development. And overall, this exercise helps explaining the solutions of a component in the same way that a marketeer could describe a product's feature, its unique selling points, and fit all of this onto its packaging. So in a project's case, our goal is to have all the partners along with us to co-design the main information and the key points that could be the basis upon which we can raise all our dissemination and communication activities. And as you can see in this small graphic, we resemble a packaging of a product. We have the front page and the back page. And in the front and center, we have the value proposition of it. What is the project about, and what is the good that the good that it's going to bring? What are the gaps that are going to fill? Also in the front, we have the target groups and the slogans, the key messages of our project. How we should have a list of certain points that we can always refer to, and this way communicate what the project is. On the backside, something that is very, very important for all of us to understand, and of course for the dissemination and communication, is how the project works. What is its core structure? Because this is something that could help us align all the dissemination and communication planning. Of course, having structured how it works, we need to find out how what are the project end goals, what we envision to have by the end of the project. And this is also very linked to what kind of needs the project comes to meet, comes to cover. Having done this exercise early on the project can help a lot to both the partners feel engaged and that their opinions are taken into account, and of course the dissemination communication to be formulated in a more relevant way to the overall project. So, discuss the key definitions and principles and the overall nature of the dissemination and communication. Now let's have a quick look on some fundamental elements that whichever the project should be taken into account early on and always as we proceed in the project. First and foremost, the branding of a project. A project always needs a visual identity that can be graphical and textual, that can contain graphics and textual cues, so that we can have a project that is recognizable, easy to digest to the people, all the audiences, and agile for multiple uses by ourselves. We have already listed many occasions, both digital ones and printed ones, as dissemination communication activities. What you should need there on branding? Of course, a logo. A logo that should consist of an emblem, a title, and ideally a tagline. And this is where, for example, scanning the proposal of the project could be very valuable, as well as the product box exercise. Again, the color scheme of the logo and of course of the overall branding. It should be very, very important. And here, one good point is to assess the color scheme of yours so that it remains distinguishable and clear for people who might experience accessibility issues, both in digital and print formats. It could be very, very helpful towards having inclusivity in a pragmatic and practical way. Having done so, you can then create some template documents, because multiple formats, multiple layouts, multiple materials are going to be created during the project. And having a uniform identity and a uniform layout throughout the different formats could be very, very useful, if not very necessary. A font family to use on your multiple template documents and the materials that you are creating. As far as I can tell, having a combination of two fonts is a very good balance, and not changing fonts through different layouts could be very useful. So you should look for fonts that are common and easy to be featured in digital, in many digital platforms, and can be printed and look very, very nice and clear in print formats. And finally, you should contain all this information and all these instructions in a brand book that could be useful, could be very useful for you and any other that is going to work on creating materials out of the project's branding. This may sound a lot, and this is why you can consult a designer before starting all of this. It could be very, very helpful to have an actual designer work with you so that they can deliver such things. The other important part, the other important stuff that you should always take into account is that all the dissemination and communication outputs are required to demonstrate the adequate knowledge funding of the EU. Here, you should keep things simple and bear in mind that you should always display the EU flag. No other European Commission's visuals, always the EU flag. Funding acknowledgement statement. This could be as simple as it is shown on your monitors. This project has received funding, blah, 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 blah. This sentence is created by the Commission, and this sentence can fit in most of your outputs, dissemination and communication alike. Additional disclaimer, if needed, can also be included. And in case you need to include something like this, maybe on a video of an interview that you created within the project, there you should add the disclaimer, and the following sentence is quite useful and pointful on what you will need to cover such a need. Views and opinions expressed are, however, those of the authors only and do not necessarily reflect those of the European Union, etc., etc. So we will be sharing this presentation after the workshop, so you can have a good look at it, copy paste it, and save it for your dissemination and communication activities. One more very fundamental thing, open access principle. You should bear in mind that it is a standard practice in the EU's granting to have open access. That is to provide online access to scientific information free of charge to the user and reusable. The Commission supports open access in its funding programs, and particularly to scientific information that refers to primarily two categories. One is the peer-reviewed scientific publications, and the other is scientific research data. Data that underline that are part of publications or data curated during and within the context of the project's activities, implementation efforts. So this is something very, very important, because you can have strong dissemination and strong scientific outputs in, let's say, the form of the numerous publications, but not having secured open access for these publications could be a significant drawback for this. So this is why you should always bear in mind that open access principle, it is a standard practice, and it is something expected by the Commission. Another important part is the language that you will use. Picking a right way to say something, to convey a message, it could be equally important to what's the actual content of it. You know, there you should need to be inclusive in your terms and in your vocabulary. Always prefer plural instead of singular. For example, you should breaking information into smaller pieces, because this is going to be your ally. This is going to be your competitive advantage to get your message across. And for sure, you should avoid project jargon. It is a mood killer for the external people that are not very much used to the project and what is implementing. This is something that can immediately have them lose their attention and their interest. So please translate your project's outputs and try to find more commonly known terms for this. This is something that it's not always easy. This is something that's not always attainable, but it always worth the trouble to communicate internally with the rest of the partners, with the people that are leading the tasks out of which you draw your information, so that you can find some common terms that can be used to refer to what they were doing. Target audiences, equally important with the language and the vocabulary that you're using. Every project aspires to influence multiple target groups. This is something that we all know. Identification of the target groups is usually already performed in the very early stages of the conception of a project, you know, and project proposals always have a section where they explain a little bit their target audiences. Okay, once you get your proposal funded and you become and you start your project, you need to move a few steps forward. You would be better off mapping actual peers and networks that could be interested on your project. And this will help you a lot throughout the progressiveness of your actions. Knowing your audience could help you create a little bit more tailored dissemination or communication outputs, and getting them the message on the right way using an easy to understand language, as we mentioned, in a way and in a format that is more suitable to them, could help you keep them more in touch with the project. It can help you have target stakeholders engagement, one of the holy grails of the impact of a project. Okay, and I slowly come to my conclusion. One final important thing to bear in mind: dissemination and communication activities are always very good are always very welcome to be implemented. But without documentation, it's like they never happened. And why I'm arguing about this? There are two main points. The one is that the impact section of a project's proposal always puts forward bold target indicators. And dissemination communication activities are always expected to aim high and achieve high. While the funding and tenders portal asks for predefined data so that the Commission can benchmark your achievements in relation to that high expectations. So it is essential, it is crucial to have a standardized reporting mechanism where that you can use to document your activities in a structured and if not automated way that can eventually enable you to have a clear view of what the dissemination and the communication efforts have achieved, a complete view and list of all the activities, so that you can go back to the target indicators set at the beginning and reflect on how these indicators were met. Okay. You can see that dissemination communication activities reporting can be standardized in a pretty easy manner. Here is a snapshot of dissemination communication reporting form that we use on different European funded projects. You can see that you can create these things either using online tools or Excel sheets or Google Forms, for example, so that you can have all your data collected in a structured way that reflects what is requested by the Commission, and in a way that helps you keep, helps you with your bookkeeping, helps you maintaining a proper list with a complete view of what happened, what were the efforts of the partners, so that you can then cross-check them with the target indicator set and argue that you have done a pretty good job on achieving such impact. That was all from my side. I have a couple of a few references here and important links that you can then check. I don't know if there are any questions. I hope I didn't overdo it with the time, and thank you very much for your attention.
Hello everyone, nice to see you all. Nice to see also my colleagues from VLabs, also some familiar faces from the GILL project. My name is Kyriaki Karidou. My background is in economics and gender studies, and the past 5 years, approximately 5 years, I've been working at VLabs for the implementation of projects focusing on driving structural change towards gender equality, inclusive gender equality in research organizations. At the moment, I serve as a project coordinator of the Horizon Europe project Sierra. In this session, we will explore the concept of gender-inclusive communication, why is it essential, and how it can be applied in practice across multiple communication channels. We will cover key areas such as language, visual communication, events management, media relations, and digital communication. Additionally, at the end, we will discuss common resistances encountered when implementing changes in communication and languages, as well as strategies to effectively navigate them. And I have at the end some references where you can visit them. Before I start the presentation, I wish also to give you a brief introduction about the Sierra project, which is a Horizon Europe project. We started in February 2025 with a total duration of 36 months. We have 10 partners from 4 Southeast European countries, namely Greece, Albania, Croatia, and Romania. The project's overall aim is to drive structural change by transforming gender equality plans to become more inclusive and intersectional across each partner institutions through the delivery of a tailored mentoring program. The mentoring program is delivered by Oxford Brookes University and Aarhus University, which serve also as the scientific coordinators of the project. At the same time, and most importantly for you that you are following this webinar, the project aspires to have a strong impact to the wider research and innovation ecosystem across to the Southeast Europe specifically through the delivery of a tailored training program as well on several gender equality topics that aims to start beginning of 2026. While at the same time creating also a community of practice comprised by stakeholders from the region who will be able also to join the training activities but also have the chance to directly exchange information and good practices. In case that you are interested in joining this community of practice, you may scan this QR code, which will direct you to the survey that we have created in order to assess the interest of stakeholders to participate in this community of practice. And through this survey also you will be able to indicate what kind of training activities you will be interested in following in the upcoming 2 years that this training program will last. Also at the bottom of your screen you can see our project website where you can also visit and see more information about the project and our partners and our key activities. Now, with regards to the inclusive communication, and I have a visual here and I think it's working, so nice. So communication is an integral part of our societies. We communicate in many ways, through words, gestures, images. All these forms help us share messages and build relationships, hopefully. Communication also connects people, and when it is inclusive, it connects even more as it fosters a sense of belonging, encourages wider participation, and strengthens mutual understanding. Here, I would like to talk about, in this slide, about gender inclusive communication and which are the differences also with the gender neutral language. Specifically, according to the Council of Europe, gender inclusive communication means speaking and writing in ways that do not exclude or discriminate everyone against their gender identity, sexuality, and other identities as well. It avoids reinforcing sexism and gender stereotypes while making space for those who identify outside the gender binary. Also, by contrast, gender-neutral language avoids gendered references altogether. It speaks about people in general without framing them specifically as men or women. And by knowing all these differences, we can choose the most appropriate language for a given context, whether we wish to highlight inclusion and recognition or to remain neutral in case that we miss any information, and thus reducing stereotypes. All in all, languages have different and various gender markers. Different languages also handle gender in distinct ways, which affects how gender inclusive communication can be applied. For example, in English, English has relatively fewer gender markers compared to other languages such as Greek. In English, the pronouns and the possessive, we have pronouns and possessives that are gender, such as he, she, her, his, and some nouns and forms of address. Most of the English nouns do not have a specific grammatical gender forms. We have words such as teacher and presidents. However, we have a few nouns with a gender which are gendered, such as actor, actress, waiter, waitress. In contrast, in Greek, we have a much more complex system of gender markers, visible in nouns, adjectives, for example, and nouns, of course. This means that achieving a gender inclusive or gender sensitive or even neutral communication requires a careful adaptation of the language, creative solutions, or even new linguistic forms to include all genders effectively. Lastly, also we should be aware that language evolves and corresponds to the current knowledge about gender inclusivity. Thus, solutions that may apply now and we think that are inclusive in the future might be different because our knowledge evolves. And here in this presentation and all the tips that are going to be presented are focusing more on the gender inclusive approach and communication. And so, do we need the gender-sensitive communication after all? And the answer is, of course, yes, because of the fundamental role it has in our society, in organization, in projects, in our everyday life in general. From better addressing also power relations in research, in entrepreneurship, in our everyday lives, and fighting stereotypes in careers and in general in the way that we are behaving to people and the way that we exist. Communication is more also because communication is more than just exchanging information, and it is an interactive and context-driven process where meaning is co-created, occurring within a specific social, economic, cultural, and political context. It reflects both individuals' attributes and norms, roles and identities, values and biases of the given community, as well as existing power structures within this community, in an organization or in the project, for example. In organizational settings, gender imbalances and roles and responsibilities shape formal and informal communication, and without this awareness, these partners can reinforce inequalities. Thus, adapting a gender perspective helps us identify and challenge these imbalances, enabling communication to support deeper cultural and structural change. Gender-inclusive communication may disrupt patterns by questioning everyday assumptions and routines. This is particularly important in entrepreneurship, where, for example, persistent gender gaps often reinforced by stereotypes such as men being entrepreneur or women adopting more supporting roles, limit opportunities for women, perpetuate exclusion for women and other marginalized groups, of course. In particular, some gender inequalities in entrepreneurship, and of course you may know more since you follow GILL, often manifest in limited access to credit, finance and capital. There are restricted networking opportunities, horizontal segregation across industries, challenges in balancing work and family life, and of course persistent prejudice and stereotypes about women and other marginalized people in businesses. Thus, by adopting a gender-sensitive approach, we can begin to challenge these barriers, highlighting inclusivity, questioning internalized assumptions, and promoting at the same time structural change that support women's and other marginalized populations' full participation and recognition to economic life. Now, we are going to see some practical tips for implementing gender-sensitive or gender-inclusive communication in 5 key communication areas, namely language, events management, digital communication, visual communication, and media relations. To start with, when we talk about language, there are several points that we need to pay attention in order to make our communication more inclusive. First, let's look at gendered pronouns. Oftentimes we use by default the masculine form of a word, but we can find more neutral or inclusive alternatives. For example, in Greece, lately we have been using the ending at in the words in order to denote all genders. However, this also has some issues, and this kind of approach faces some criticism. We should also, another tendency also is to adding irrelevant information about gender in a description of individual. For example, instead of just referring to a professor, sometimes we refer to a female professor. Also, we should avoid gender stereotypes when describing people or even objects. For example, instead of labeling something or someone as emotional, we could use words like empathetic, which carry less biases and connotations. Then there is a problem of invisibility and omission. Language often makes women disappear. A classic example is the man using the word mankind instead of humankind, or manpower instead of human power. And finally, let's think about subordination and trivialization. The way that we order words matter. We should think about reshuffling this. For example, instead of when greeting some people, instead of mentioning like men and women, you can instead reverse the order and use that interchangeably throughout your speech, and use also women and men. Or also with regards to subordination, also remember, especially being identified as a woman, several times I have been called as my dear or darling from a person who doesn't even know me. When it comes to visual communication, the choices we make really matter. We should try to avoid colors using that are being used arbitrarily connected to one gender. Instead, we should use alternative colors such as orange or green. Also, we should people in all of their diversity should be represented in visuals, while attempting to portray them by breaking notions of gender roles that perpetuate gender inequalities. Also, another critical element in visuals are icons, because they easily tend to represent stereotypes. For instance, a typical women's icon comes with a skirt. So we should all be aware about these potential biases and stereotypical portrayal of people. Another category is the digital communication, which refers to the online channels such as websites and social media that we use in order to communicate our work. Social media and websites are strategic for organizations since they actually visualize and show to the wider audience their activities and values. Also, normally there is especially in projects or like in big companies, there is a team that handles digital communication that is outside of the core, let's say, of the business. So in that sense, we should adapt an inclusive communication strategy that is attentive to biases and stereotypes. There should be also in websites and intranets, in case that an organization uses that, a space where gender equality work is depicted. And again, all visuals and language should be inclusive, following the tips that I just shared. Another aspect when it comes to inclusive communication is about event management, and especially also for projects. Several times we handle the organization of several events, either online or on site. And here there are also a number of aspects to consider. First of all, women and other marginalized groups are less likely to be chosen as speakers or as a keynotes or discussants or opening the panels. Thus, when organizing events, commit to gender diversity while avoiding tokenism, of course, because there is also this so-called approach at women and steer. Take also into consideration caring responsibilities, which still disproportionately affect women. For example, you may allocate budget for childcare services for the entire duration of the panel or the meeting in case that is on site. Of course, the venue should be accessible to all, while allowing also for online participation. And of course, our visuals following the promotion of this event should be inclusive and attentive to potential stereotypes and biases. Lastly, it's important to adopt an inclusion and harassment-free policy that should be drafted and shared in advance among the speakers and presenters, which they should commit also to and make it a prerequisite for participation. At last, when it comes to media relations, we mean all the communication material or the written communication material, all interviews should aim to have an equal representation. Also, the content of the publication itself, again, should avoid stereotypical and patronizing expressions and adapt an inclusive language. Of course, people are resistant to change. We don't like to change our routines or things that we learn and we do by default, for example. So also this kind of changes in communication, which also are a bit more, let's say, it needs a bit more demanding in the time and the effort that you need to put, because somehow it reflects also the way that you start thinking about things, people, or like making sense of your reality. So this kind of change in the language comes also with skepticism. And this skepticism connects with people being gender blind, meaning that normally as people, we fail to recognize roles and responsibilities that are ascribed to us by or imposed to us by the specific social, cultural, economic and political context and the timing that we live in. So sometimes people clearly deny the decisive role that language can play in communication and promoting gender equality. Also, sometimes all these changes in the language are proposed to be as artificially imposed, too politically correct, too ugly, cacophonic. In Greek, for example, we start using female equivalent of people occupying top decision-making positions. For example, in Greek, minister by default was used by the masculine ending. Now we start using also the female ending. Or in the written text, we start using both endings, and some people are criticizing it as being cacophonic or unreadable, this text. Hopefully, for most of the deniers of the change, they are not really passionate proponents of sexism, I hope. And more often than not, they are unaware of the problems caused by this gender approach to the language, or simply are unaware of it. So that's why they defend internalized norms as being natural or given or common or even inclusive. And sometimes all it takes is to demonstrate that they are not. Also, we should change paradigm, and this should come also from the state, that they should they should also adopt inclusive policies with regards to inclusive communication. We should offer training and education to people to start being aware about these biases. Of course, within an organization or in a project, we should adopt an official policy for adapting an inclusive language, and of course provide specific examples that are available to the people and they can use it in their everyday life. Our time is up, but maybe the participants can share in the chat for the discussion later on some experiences that they have in their own language. What are the biases and what are the coping mechanisms at the moment for tackling these biases? Here are also the references used for the preparation of this presentation, and in case that you have any questions, feel free to drop me a message, and thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Kyriaki, for this presentation. Now I would like to leave the floor to Gabriela Quaranta for her slot on communication in Living Labs. So you can share your screen when you're ready.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot, Ariana. I will share my screen. Okay, so good morning, everybody. I'm Gabriela Quaranta. I'm both the coordinator of the GILL project with my colleague Arianna, and I'm the head of the network unit as well in the European Network of Living Labs. So wearing the two different hats, but focusing now more on the communication and dissemination activities within Living Labs. I will start my timer, so to be sure I won't be out of time. And going directly to the next slide to briefly highlight what are we going to tackle in this short session that will be about communication in Living Labs. First of all, since GILL actually was born as Gendered Innovation Living Labs, we wanted to highlight what makes Living, why communication is essential for the sustainability and trust of Living Labs, and how to craft clear, engaging messages while also showing impact and really be able to address the needs in terms of communication of many different kind of stakeholders and audiences. So first of all, what is a living lab? Because of course, we in all or partners in GILL perfectly knows what a living lab is, but still there might be confusion for newcomers, let's say. So in brief, living labs are open innovation ecosystems acting in real life environments and based on a very structured and systematic user co-creation approach that really integrates research and innovation activities together with within communities and really placing citizens at the center of innovation. This means that the real end users, real people that will benefit of or use some new innovation services, products, or whatever, are considered as an active actor during the whole research and innovation cycle, rather than factors that might be asked to give just a random feedback or similar. The living labs are based on these building blocks, which are co-creation, orchestration, multi-method approach, multi-stakeholder participation, active user involvement, and real-life setting, and are, apart from physical space, really a modern tool for research that is able to adapt the needs of today, also linked to many big societal challenges that we are facing, to the development of new innovations, of new products, of new services, really integrating the feedback of users into the research and innovation process. And of course, at the center of the Living Lab is the involvement of all the different actors that characterize the quadruple helix. So exactly like Arianna was mentioning for GILL, academia, government, citizens, and the industry. But the question of today about living labs is rather than what living labs are or how living labs act, why communication matters in living labs. First of all, because visibility and awareness raising are really, really important in living labs as well. So to be sure that people understand what you are doing and why they matter as well. Engagement and trust, to build relationship with the stakeholders across the quadruple helix that will be involved really in a transparent and consistent way, ensuring a smooth and clear communication overall. To enhance collaboration and co-creation as key elements of the Living Lab methodology. So be sure that we are open and inclusive, inviting others to join, sharing and co-creating solutions. And last but not least, it is important communication to ensure sustainability and impact, and to be able to demonstrate that the results derived from the Living Labs activities are really useful over time. And in this way, you secure the long-term support, ensuring the Living Lab continuity as well. In general, which are the 5 questions, the 5 whys that we should ask ourselves when it comes to communication? Why is promoting and communicating Living Labs value and activities important? Why do stakeholders need to engage with these values and these activities? Why should communication be continuous over the time and not limited or framed into a specific activity or project? Why is feedback crucial to promote and communicate activities within the Living Labs to the external audiences? And why is demonstrating impact essential for sustainability? So these are the 5 whys that we should take into consideration when focusing on communication and communicating Living Labs and Living Labs activities. But which are the 5 answers that we should always keep in mind when communicating Living Labs? It is very, very important to engage stakeholders, to build awareness and ensure sustainability by defining co-created values, unique contributions, and by proposing a real and clear value proposition that is clearly understandable by all. It is important to foster collaboration and co-creation by really stakeholders that should be involved in a certain process, tailoring the messages to each of the groups involved. It is important to stay relevant and to show progress by creating a communication calendar, for example, with regular updates and consistent touch points. And it is really, really important to refine strategies and to build trust by collecting the stakeholder feedback and using this feedback to continuously improve communication. Last but not least, it is important to validate effectiveness and sustain trust, really highlighting the outcomes through success stories, case studies, and impact metrics, of course. I was speaking of value proposition. This is a very, very important, clear message that should come from the Living Lab. And it should be really able to explain who the Living Lab is serving, what kind of problem we are solving, and how it is possible to create value. As well as it's very important to keep the message clear, concise, and really stakeholder focused, because as mentioned, stakeholder engagement is one of the main building blocks of the Living Lab. It is important to have very clear formulas, really direct, really able to share the message in a very effective way. So, for example, as a reference, we could say of our Living Lab helps who, so the target group, to solve which problem by which value and solution. Just to give you an example, which is related to one of our members, the Krakow Living Lab helps small and medium enterprises and startups to test their products with real users in real life environments before the market launch. In this case, the value proposition offered by the Krakow Living Lab, it's very, very clear and direct, and really highlight what they are doing, with whom, and why. Another very important issue is to craft and to tailor the messages according, of course, to the audience, according to what we want to deliver through the message, and so far and so forth. So we need to focus really on one key idea to avoid jargon and to keep it simple. We need to use engaging language, short, human-centered, inclusive, really, really direct, and again, simple. We need to speak in terms of benefits rather than futures, really aiming at highlighting the outcomes for people and communities. And of course, we always need to include a call to action. So really to ask your question, ask your audience what you want them to do next, how they can really contribute to your activities to solve a certain problem, etc., etc. So just as an example, rather than saying we provide multi-stakeholder co-creation processes for innovation ecosystems, we should rephrase the message like, for example, we bring people together to design solutions that improve everyday life, really to highlight, of course, the co-creation approach, but really also underlining the fact that being together to do a certain thing would bring improvements in everyday life. Another important element is the storytelling, the power of storytelling. Why it is important? Because actually stories connect people and make complex ideas simple, understandable, and reliable. It is proof that stories are memorable. People remember narratives. A good storytelling, a good narrative better than facts and numbers, because they really provide clear messages and example in a very, very simple way. Stories build empathy, helping stakeholders really feeling the impact of the Living Lab. And stories are able to really mobilize the action, inspiring collaboration and supporting support and investment. So the message is keep it simple and stupid, really a simple structure to be sure that you really are able to use the power of the storytelling. And for the Living Lab would be highlight the problem, highlight the process that would solve the problem, enhance the impact, and of course, provide the call to action. This was mentioned also in the previous presentations, but it's important for Living Labs as well. So to always use the right channels and according to the audience. For example, if you want to reach policymakers, you should focus on policy briefs, tackle events, exhibitions. If you want to involve citizens, you can organize co-creation workshops with them, or use storytelling approaches and social media, of course. When you want to involve businesses, you need to provide demonstrations, case studies, and showcases. And when you want to involve academia, of course, you should better focus on something that is closer to the academia world, which would be publications, research publications, conferences, scientific conferences, and so forth and so forth. But it's really important also to really being able to show the value of the Living Lab. We mentioned, of course, that stories are more memorable rather than numbers, but numbers are important as well to highlight the participation in Living Labs activities and the engagement, to provide success stories. And a very important element is to be sure that we always, not only in a certain project, not only after the end of the project, but continuously, really to build and sustain trust. So before closing, last but not least, some do's and don'ts. Be sure that you are focusing on one message, and this message is clear and concise, that you highlight benefits and outcomes, not just activities you're working on. The communication should be continuous, not only at the end of a certain project. Use stories and evidence to inspire and build trust. And of course, since you are working in a living lab, so with the quadruple helix, be sure that you are able to adapt the message to each of the different audiences and target groups across the 4 helix model. Of course, avoid to overload with too much technical terms. Speak only about the process and without showing impact would not be really beneficial. Forget to involve stakeholders in the story is not useful as well. Do not limit communication to one channel, and do not treat communication as just an afterthought. So that's it from my side. Of course, the presentation will be shared, and I'm here for any questions now or later on, also through email. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriella, for this presentation. And now we can move on to the next one, which is From Plan to Practice, GILL Project Insights by Eric Goga from Vilabs. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Just let me share my screen. So I hope you can see my screen on presenter mode.
We can not even, okay, great.
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So thank you very much for being here today. My name is Eric Goga. I am a project manager in VA Labs, and today I will present you the insights from the GILL project as the dissemination and communication manager of GILL. So in this session, basically, we will go from theory to practice, and we will see how the GILL dissemination communication plan was implemented, was created, through what tools and examples, and what takeaway lessons can be taken from these, and what recommendation can be extracted. The next thing, the first thing to talk about is the framework, the GILL dissemination communication plan framework. So our plan was built around 5 key elements: clear objectives to align with the project goals and impact strategy, target audience through the quadruple helix from academia, industry, government, and citizens, tailored key messages per audience that are inclusive and gender sensitive, the use of multiple channels and tools such as our website, our social media channels, newsletters, event publications, and a continuous monitoring and tracking that will allow us to adapt our strategy throughout the whole process. And behind this framework, we followed 4 goals, keeping our communication clear, inclusive, accessible, and co-created with the partners. So this is the plan that we agreed on. How we reached to this plan, so the design of this plan, we used an inclusive process. We ran an internal survey and mapping exercise so that every partner could contribute their views and priorities. This ensured the plan was not top-down, but co-created by the consortium, which was really important. And this is an important lesson, as the inclusiveness starts not only with external audiences, but also with how you design the communication internally. This is why we gave the partners the opportunity to fill in the questionnaire and to co-create the project's dissemination communication methodology. From the survey, we went out on how we made the plan real. We begin with stakeholder mapping, the identification of audience across the quadruple helix, the partner contribution through the survey that I mentioned before, tailored messages that are adapted to content to each audience, the channels activation, and monitoring and adaptation. So this is how the plan got real. I will skip this because this is already mentioned in the previous sessions, but in GILL, we both embedded this strategy to maximize visibility, inclusiveness, and impact. We embedded both communication and dissemination in order to have greater impact. Additionally, we are fully compliant with the EU dissemination obligation rules through the acknowledgement EU funding, the disclaimer, and the use of the EU emblem as discussed before. And once we had identified our audiences and plan, we worked on tailoring messages to each group. Here are some examples of the key messages we developed for citizens, academia, government, and industry. For example, for citizens, we went with equity and gender equity makes every day a better day for all. For academia, we use improved research on gender innovation through the living labs. For government and public sector, one option was to go with advanced policies on gender innovation and living labs to be applied in different governmental contexts. And for industry and private sector, unlocking opportunity, the GILL's impact on workforce diversity. These tailoring messages ensure that our messages are relevant and inclusive instead of one size fits all. Next on are the tools and channels that we had in action. In GILL, we approach communication and dissemination as two interlinked but distinct activities. Communication focused on visibility and engagement, for example, on social media and outreach events, while dissemination focused on sharing results with those who could not use them, for example, publication, policy brief, scientific community, and both were embedded in the same strategy. So through the methods, the tools, and the channel, the GILL project ensures high visibility, inclusiveness, and uptake of the results. One of the key tools are our social media channels. So from the beginning, we set up GILL accounts on LinkedIn and Twitter, now X. However, as the project progressed, we made the conscious decision not to use Twitter, now X, due to its policy conflicts with gender equality and EU values. Instead, we focused our efforts on LinkedIn, where we built a strong professional community around the project. The results so far, for example, for the highlights you can see are almost 43,000 impressions through the last year, more than 1,500 reaction, more than 32 comments, and 57 responses. We also use the Nodo, which is a really useful tool for us for open access to deliverables, ensuring transparency. And this combination of platforms helps us to ensure visibility, engagement, and credibility. Now, let me show you two concrete examples of how we turned this whole strategy into a real campaigns. First of all is the International Women's Day social media campaign, which took place on 8 March and was through our LinkedIn profile. The goal was to highlight the women's role in innovation and at the same time to raise visibility of the GILL Forum, a tool that is available through GILL Hub, where we started a thread with discussions over the related issues and thematics on the International Women's Day. So it was an LinkedIn campaign with inclusive visual and messages, and the results were strong engagement amplified by partner repost. We used hashtags that were dedicated for these campaigns, such as the IWD, the GILL Project EU, or the gender equality. The second example is a tailored communication for the AOEs. For each AOE, we created tailored blogs and short capsule videos. Actually, the capsule videos are on the making, so would be available very soon. But these explained pilot activities. The blogs explain pilot activities in accessible and engaging ways. The blogs were published through our website, a dedicated call to action. Also, a newsletter was released regarding all the 15 blogs, and weekly social media posts were made again for each of the blog of the AOEs. Also, the blog posts will be available through our Zenodo community to reach a broader audience, and the results are an increased visibility of the pilot work, engagement from stakeholders, content reusable in events and newsletters. So now we will go to the lessons learned and recommendations as our last slides for today. Going back, we can draw some lessons learned that early planning ensures consistency, that visuals and storytelling boosts reach, as mentioned through the previous sessions as well. Inclusiveness strengthens the engagement. We also face some challenges, such as to balance the EU versus the local messages, so tailored messages probably sometimes in the local languages is mostly preferred, and to sustain the engagement after a big event. So we went to the events, but after all, we need to somehow sustain this engagement and even enrich our community. From all these, we can draw some recommendations and key takeaways that can be used either from other EU projects or any stakeholder that is engaged in the communication and dissemination activities. And this could be to make inclusiveness as part of a strategy from the start, so involve the inclusivity part from the start, tailored messages to the audiences, to use clear and accessible language, to monitor and adapt continuously, and to do not forget that a good communication equalizes a stronger impact of our work, which is the actual aim of what we all are doing. So I think this is all from our side. If you have any questions, please drop them to the comment, or we can discuss it later on. I think I was pretty quick. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ari. And now let's move on to the final segment of today's session with the success case study of action-oriented experimentation number 13, retaining women in tech companies by changing workplace cultures. This is a pre-recorded video by one of the representatives of the AOE, Edda Selling from Melbourne University. So I will play the video so that she will explain what the AOE has been doing so far.
Hello there, my name is Edda Selin and I'm part of the Lab for Social Informatics at Melbourne University, and we are one of the GILL partners. Today I'm excited to present our success case study. It's action-oriented experimentation number 13, all about retaining women in tech companies by changing workplace cultures. I'm pleased to present our use case as it offers a strong example of how scientific findings can be effectively transferred and tailored to diverse audiences, spanning academia, industry, and local networks. I'm a researcher and coordinate the GILL project and also work across several interdisciplinary projects in my team. With a background in gender studies and cultural anthropology, I bring both theoretical insight and hands-on experience in applying gender and diversity concepts in tech and organizational settings. Nicola Marston is my professor and head of the Lab for Social Informatics at Melbourne University. Her work centers on advancing diversity and inclusion in tech with a particular focus on gender equality. She has served as an expert advisor for initiatives such as Germany's Equality Report and the German UNESCO Committee, and has worked on multiple EU-level projects. She co-authored a book with Karen Holzblatt and has published over 100 peer-reviewed scientific papers. She also consults with companies to create fairer and more productive work environments. Here in our lab, we work at the intersection of social informatics, gender studies, human-computer interaction, participatory design. And in GILL, our main responsibility is the development of gender-responsive methods on the one hand, and, as I said, one of the action-oriented experimentations we have in our GILL project. Our first major milestone was the co-creation of gender-responsive methods together with our consortium and also their publication on the GILL Hub. This growing, openly accessible collection provides the thematic foundation for our communication and dissemination activities and serves as a core resource that we actively promote to different audiences, from researchers and practitioners to companies. And for our action-oriented experimentation, the challenge we address is clear. It's about the problem that many tech companies hire women to reduce gender gaps, but the workplace culture remains unchanged. Women are often measured by different standards, assigned certain tasks because of gender stereotypes, or are excluded from critical innovation processes. And this is the reason that our goal is to show companies how to make gender inequality a priority, not only in recruitment, but also in team practices and in design methods. For this, we experiment directly inside companies as living labs, who test our interventions that foster psychological safety, equal participation, and gender-responsive innovation. Our key success in the dissemination and communication is how we translate our research and innovation results into different environments. The graphic you see now maps our network of stakeholders and the pathways we use to disseminate and exploit results. At the center of our network are the stakeholders we work with, and around it you see the main channels and target groups we use. On the one hand, this is the science practice dialogues and scientific conferences, which adds up to like the academic group, the implementation partner, which is mostly our local community, and of course, our living lab companies, which represent the industry. I will now walk you through each of these pathways and share what worked for us and why. And of course, this overlaps sometimes. So sometimes one individual is part of our implementation partner because they are supporting us with some events, but on the other hand, also interested in our science practice dialogues and participates in these even if they are not a researcher. So this is all a little bit overlapping too. But let's dive deeper into the science practice dialogues. These are spaces where we connect research with practitioners. We design these dialogues to be interactive and reflective so that companies can directly test and discuss our gender-responsive methods. And for example, what we did is that we ran a session at a local IT barcamp. And in this session, we discussed the topic women in tech. So in the session, we tried firstly the privilege walk with a large group, as you see here in this picture. And we also gave a scientific input on women in tech and some numbers, but also explained that we have a behavioral design focus for our gender-responsive methods as interventions that they can try to test by themselves. And this is what we did in the third part of the session. We tried some team techniques from our catalog of gender-responsive methods. And these sessions or these events allow HR people, diversity managers, but also normal employees or technical teams to see how our methods, how our interventions can be applied to real challenges that occur in their day-to-day working life. And these dialogues have always helped us to build a long-term partnership with several people, with companies, to stay engaged because they gain practical tools instead of abstract research results. A second pillar of our dissemination strategy is the scientific community. Publishing and presenting in well-chosen conferences is crucial for legitimizing our methods and reaching researchers who influence practices. For example, we participated at the Human-Computer Interaction International last year and this year. Also, there's a German human-computer conference called Mensch und Computer, where we participated last year. This year, Nicola was part of the International Conference on Gender Research, and this year we participated at the Distributed Computing and Artificial Intelligence. And just a week ago, we participated with a workshop at the German Informatics Society yearly conference. But just a few examples, because these platforms, to speak more generally now, allow us to position our gender-responsive innovation as a mainstream topic in computer science, in AI, in human-computer interaction, and in social sciences. And a practical insight: selecting conferences where tech practitioners and researchers meet, not purely academic spaces, has increased our impact. As I said before, sometimes there are individuals who are interested because they met us at, for example, a bar camp, and then they start to visit us at these events too. Third, we collaborate with implementation partners, organizations or individuals that can scale or apply our results. One strong example is the KI Campus. This is a German national platform for AI education. Our gender-responsive methods are now part of the socially responsible AI design course, which is funded by another project from the Lab for Social Informatics. And this way, the knowledge moves from a research consortium into a widely accessible learning platform. But we also work with regional speakers, managers, and networks to embed gender-responsive innovation in their programs. For example, we co-funded a local Women in IT network to connect several active individuals. We had guest lectures, presentations at diversity weeks, workshops with women networks within our Living Lab companies, but also Nicola is frequently invited to speak at panels with a large audience to discuss our topics, for example, at the KI Festival, at the AI Festival here in Heilbronn. But we also show posters at events like the Science Night in our campus, at Heilbronn University, and we just try to be present at different events to showcase our results. And all in all, these connections ensure our work continues beyond the GILL project lifetime. Finally, there are our Living Lab companies. This is where the experimentation happens. We test and refine methods inside real organizations, for example, by exploring to reduce subtle exclusion in teams, by designing personas or reflective tools to make innovation processes more inclusive, but also by working on psychological safety so that women can stay and thrive in tech teams. And these pillars produce actionable insights that companies can adopt immediately and that we can share back with the research communities then. But in addition to our activities that serve our use case, the action-oriented experimentation, we also regularly present our topics in a variety of venues, such as executive meetings, diversity manager roundtables, international conferences, etc. For example, we participated at an internal software developer conference, and there Nicola held a presentation on retaining women in tech. I offered the privilege walk to the run audience, which was highly appreciated. And at the end, I conducted it over 10 times over the day. We also presented a GILL poster with additional information. And we had many one-on-one talks where we consulted employees and also managers on our topics. Our main learnings on dissemination and exploitations are that stakeholder diversity matters. Academics, industry, and local communities need tailored approaches. Early and sustained engagement is key. We involve companies and networks from the beginning, not only after results exist. And practical, ready-to-use method build trust and adoption faster than theoretical frameworks all alone. Also, strategic event selection where research and practice overlap amplifies our reach. Through this strategy, we were able to turn the GILL research outputs into concrete change in tech companies, strengthen our scientific impact, and strengthen our stakeholder network. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope that this case study shows how action-oriented experimentation number 13 did use a multi-layered exploitation and communication strategy to reach academia, industry, and local communities. Thank you so much.
And now we have a Q&A and discussion moment. So for those of you who don't have to run, and if you have any questions, we can address them now. And to reply to Samantha in the chat, I don't know if she's left already, but yes, we will be sending all the materials. We will be uploading all the materials, including the presentation, and we will be sending the presentation to all the participants. So those will be available. So again, I don't know if any of you has any questions or comments. Okay, seems like not. All the presentations were quite complete, so, and clear, very clear. So then, if there are no questions and no further comments, I would thank all the speakers for being here, for sharing their knowledge and experience and expertise on the theme. And thank you to all the participants. Again, we will be sending all the materials so you can rewatch them and review them. And thank you so much. Wishing you a great day and a great weekend ahead. Thanks.